Okay, so thank you so much for joining us tonight at our session. So it is What Goes Up Must Now Come Down, Everything You Need to Know About Carbon Removals with Dr. Gabrielle Walker. So we're going to just give you a little lowdown of how the session is going to go this evening, just a bit of an overview. So we're going to start with some introductions from both Mothers Can and Parents for Future. This is our first event that Mothers Can and Parents for Future are doing together collaboratively. And we're really excited to be working in this way with Parents for Future and coming together. We think it's fantastic that we're bringing two mother and parent focus groups together in one space. So we have myself and Sophie, who you'll be hearing from in a moment, from Mothers Can, and then we've got Lucy and Reka from Parents for Future with us tonight as well, so you'll be hearing from us. So we're going to be hearing from that first, then we're going to go straight to Dr. Gabrielle Walker, and she's going to talk to us for approximately 25 minutes. We're then going to go into some breakout rooms. We've got a question which we'd like to ask everyone in the breakout rooms, and then when we come out of the breakout rooms, we've got a Q&A session with Dr. Gabrielle Walker as well. And then we'll do a little wrap up at the end, and then we'll say goodnight to you all. So that's how it's going to go tonight. So I am going to hand over to Sophie to give you a little introduction to Mothers Can.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Thanks, and it's amazing to see so many on the talk tonight. And welcome to you all. My name's Sophie Marple. I set up Mothers Can a couple of years ago with a group of mums. We really felt, and I'm sure you all feel the same, is to address the climate crisis, which is the biggest challenge facing humanity. We need everyone to step up and step into their power and push for change. We strongly believe that mothers have the potential to be a united voice for change. And we felt at the time there wasn't really a place for mums to really come together and support each other in basically how we're feeling, because it's you know, it really does feel such a huge challenge, and we have so much to lose, but also into how to take meaningful action and how to really make impact. And so this is what we wanted to offer all mums from all over the UK and from all backgrounds, was the opportunity to connect, to build skills and to learn from each other. And so that we would all become more powerful together. We know, I think we all know on this call, that a brighter future, it's possible. We do have all the solutions now that are available to make the change that's required. But what we are lacking is the wider political will. We believe that if we have more mother leaders in the climate sector stepping into their power and pushing them for change, this could be an unstoppable force for good. So at Mothers Can, we've got three central objectives. Firstly, it's to be the go-to platform for mums who are ready to take action and want to connect with others who feel the same. Secondly, we believe really strongly in the power of collective action, and that's how we feel, why we're so excited to have this being a joint event, for example, to be working together with Parents for Future. We believe it takes us coming out and all working together, and what we want to encourage mums to be doing is taking action with others in their local neighbourhood. And so by offering skills development and training, we help mums identify how and where they are best placed to take action with others. And then thirdly, we support those who want to and who are ready to build their own action group in their own local community. And we do that by helping facilitate meetings to get a group together. And then we offer ongoing support to build the power of the group. We are an almost entirely voluntary network. We have one paid member of staff, and we're a self-sustaining network. And what that means really is that everyone who connects with us, anyone who does the training, anyone who comes to a session, anyone who wants to get involved, we have the opportunity to get involved as much or as little as they want in running the organisation and inputting into our strategy. So I just want to say that if any of this or all of it sounds of interest to you and you are looking to get involved, I've got two upcoming opportunities to share with you. On Wednesday, we've got a welcome call at 8 o'clock, and that is your opportunity to have an informal chat about what we do and how to get involved. Hopefully a link might go into the chat. If not now, then by the end of the session. And yes, that's Wednesday at 8 o'clock. And then the second thing is that we're also recruiting now for our fourth cohort of a course that we run every year called Anxiety to Action. This starts in January, and I think you can probably understand what that course is about. It's for people who are really, mums who are really waiting ready to start getting involved, to take a first step into collective action, but need a bit of support about how to get going. By the way, it's a 6-week fully funded course. The sessions are 2 hours long, and they're run on Tuesday nights. And as I say, it's a real opportunity to learn how to make impact and to find your place in the movement and meet other like-minded mums from across the UK. There's lots more information on our website about that. So again, the link will go into the chat. If not now, then at some point in the evening. So please take a look. So that's from us at Mothers Can. And now I'm going to pass over to Lucy to tell you a bit more about Parents of the Future.
Thank you, Sophie. Hi everyone, I'm Lucy, she, her pronouns from Parents of the Future. It's lovely to see some familiar faces here and lots of new ones as well. And yes, we love Mothers Can, and this may be our first sort of official events collaboration, but we have been informally collaborating for many years now, which is always a real pleasure, and yeah, highly advocate signing up for the Anxiety to Action course in the new year. So Parents of the Future is a UK-wide parent and carer-led movement, climate justice movement. We have about 40,000 supporters, about 35 local groups, been running for about 5 years. And we campaign locally and nationally for a fast, fair transition away from fossil fuels, as well as on a variety of other climate, nature and justice-based issues. And we're an organising movement, so we really focus on how we organise. We spend a lot of time looking at anti-oppression within the movement, and we have a lot of emotional support structures and wellbeing spaces, because trying to build resilient, powerful communities is how we stay in this for the long haul. As busy parents, as humans, we're facing multiple crises for a long time. So building community and finding joy in our spaces is as important to us as the really critical campaigning that we do. I'll keep it brief because I think we're probably all really keen to hear from Gabrielle. But if you want to hear more about Parents of the Future, you can sign up to our newsletter, which I'm sure Raika can pop in the chat. And we also run regular welcome calls, weekly calls at the moment. I think the next one is this Friday lunchtime. And then we have one, I think, next week, Wednesday or Thursday evening. And we also have actually a brand new campaigning capsule that we can share with anyone who's interested in a really easy toolkit to learn a little bit more about the links between fossil fuels and the weather we're seeing in the UK at the moment and various ways to get involved in campaigning on that. So yeah, that's it for me. I'm passing back to you, Sophie, to introduce Gabrielle.
You are indeed. Thanks so much, Lucy. So I'm really excited to have Gabrielle here today because I met Gabrielle about 3 or 4 years ago. I saw her speaking at an event, and I was really, really impressed by her straight talking approach to what can be actually a very tricky and contentious subject. And, you know, she just really presented it in a way that I thought, I can really understand this. I can get on board with it. And I think it comes across that she is a presenter, she's a broadcaster, an author and a journalist. And she was doing all of this. And obviously she's got a PhD, she's a doctor. She was doing all of this, and then in 2020, when she realised that carbon removals were just not part of the mainstream agenda, she set up her organisation Rethinking Removals, which I think she'll talk a bit about maybe tonight. So I'm going to pass over, and then, as I said, as Lindsay said, we're going to have a Q&A after we go into breakout rooms. There'll be Gabrielle will be talking, and then there'll be a Q&A, and then we will then there will be breakout rooms, then there'll be a Q&A. We'll bring you back for a Q&A. So any questions you have on the way, put them in the chat. We'll definitely hold on to them to ask them when we come back in. Gabrielle, over to you.
Lovely, and thank you so much, Sophie and Lindsay and Lucy and all of you for inviting me here. When I was chatting to the ladies before everybody else came in, I said this was the easiest yes I said all year when I got the request to speak here, because this is way my favorite audience. And so one thing I want to say first of all is I am thrilled that my 95-year-old mum is joining us on her iPad, and she was my first inspiration in the whole of the climate space. And I suddenly realized if I was talking to all these other mums, why shouldn't I be talking to my own too? But she understood about the need to act on climate change and taught me about it long before anyone else was speaking about it. So it's been a real inspiration. And I think one of the reasons that I was so excited to speak to this audience is that all of you are are influences and inspirations, not just in the outside world, but also in your families. And that gives a very different kind of approach and attitude to how we solve this crisis. I don't think it's a coincidence. I am working with so many brilliant women. Now, I know there's some very wonderful men on, and I don't mean to make you feel left out, but really, there's so many great women working in this space, and I'm loving working with all of them. So thank you for coming. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to talk about a subject that has become very close to my heart. I'm going to show you a few slides in a moment and talk about it. But before I do, I just want to say that I came to carbon removals almost by accident. I started off as a scientist, and I worked in media, in magazines, in radio and television, writing books. I worked with policymakers. I worked with in the private sector. I worked in all these different spaces. And eventually I thought, I'm not doing enough. It's never enough. And things were getting worse and worse. I have to find the area where I can make the biggest difference with all the things I know how to do. And so I spent a year, I give a lot of keynotes. So I was giving keynotes around the world, and I was trying to look for what's the area of climate change where if you could unlock it, it would make the biggest difference. But at the moment, it's getting the least attention. And that's why I came to carbon removals, because it was an area of climate change that the only attention it was getting was negative. And yet all the science was saying this is something that's really needed. So I thought, I'm going to look at that and see what I can find. And what I found really surprised me. And that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today. So I'll go to my slides now. And I just want to warn you before I do, I wanted to remind us all, everybody's here because they're interested in the topic, because many part of Climate Action Network, understanding the importance of climate change. But I'm just going to remind you of why this is so important. So brace yourself. That gets a little bit ugly before I start talking about the solutions that will help get us out of the hole that we've dug for ourselves. Is everybody ready? Braced. You're all braced. Okay, I will now share my screen and I will go to my slides. So, am I successfully sharing? Can someone give me a thumbs up? Excellent, good. So, so this is me on the top of a mountain in Iceland, and I'm looking at a plaque that's on a piece of rock. And I'm going to go back to the plaque at the end of this talk, but I just want you to remember that I was up there. I went there for a very special reason, and it is relevant to what I'm going to talk to you about now. So this is, it was a very long mouthful. What goes up must come down. Everything you need to know about carbon removals. I shortened it a bit here. Here we go. So when I started work on climate change 30 years ago, I was saying, these are the things that are going to be coming for us. And one of the things that I want to start by saying now is one of the reasons that it's been so difficult for us to act on climate change is how subtle it's been, how it's taken decades for it to manifest itself. And this is one way of seeing that. So this is a map of the world. You can see that some bits of it are blue and some bits of it are yellow. And I'm going to run it forwards from 1880 to the present day. And then I want you to watch out for, if you can, how variable the climate is, how sometimes it's cold, sometimes it's warm in different parts of the world, and therefore how hard it is to see that climate change is happening. So let's see if I can get this going. So you can see it's quite warm in Southern Africa, then it went quite red, and in the Pacific then, and then this was a cool few years, and then a bit warmer up in the Arctic there in the 20s, and quite warm in the Arctic, and then it went cooler again, a bit warm, then colder. Can you see how very variable it is? And that's one of the reasons it's been hard to see the signal of climate change until you get to the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s and 2020s. So I put this up here because, ladies and gentlemen, it's no longer subtle. When I started talking about climate change 30 years ago, it was something that was going to be in the future, and now it's very much with us. And here's some of the evidence of that. So when I'm writing about climate change, when I'm talking about climate change, it's actually quite hard to choose which pictures I should use. In the past,
Hey.
Who was that? Okay, we're still good. Are we good? Okay. So when I started talking about climate change, it's quite hard to find pictures to illustrate what I was talking about that was going to come. And now it's quite hard to choose. It's like, which mega heat wave should we talk about now? This was a heat wave that I chose that actually had surface land temperatures of more than 50 degrees for days on end in India. And then which forest fire should I choose? This was one in Canada. It could have been Sweden. Could have been in Chile. It could have been in Australia. It could have been across Russia. This was one in Canada where this particular town had temperatures that were so high over so many days that the woods around it spontaneously burst into flame. And then this is flooding too. I don't know if any of you noticed or remembered that last year, Pakistan was flooded. And Pakistan's not a small country, but a third of the country was underwater. And I spoke to a journalist friend who'd said that they knew someone who'd gone there and who was interviewing a local who'd been taking a boat around trying to rescue things from the flooding. And his boat bumped into something that turned out to be an electricity pylon. So that was this flooding in Pakistan. And then there's also intensifying storms. So I wanted to put this one in because I thought it was quite striking. I was giving a talk to some high net worth individuals in Toronto and in Canada in 2019. And I showed a picture of a hurricane and I said, hurricanes aren't getting more frequent, but they are getting more intense. And I showed a picture of one of them that had been very intense. And afterwards, a guy came up to me and said, you shouldn't show that one. You should show this one, Hurricane Dorian, that's just gone across the Bahamas. And I said, why Hurricane Dorian? And he said, I used to be a climate change skeptic, but I had a house in the Bahamas and I don't have it anymore. He said it looked like a nuclear bomb had hit it. And that's not a bad analogy because the amount of heat energy that we're putting into the atmosphere at the moment is the equivalent of 4 Hiroshima bombs worth of energy every second. So I wanted to show you this because it's a reminder that this is now serious. This isn't something that's going to happen in the future or that we need to worry about for our children, our children's children. It's really here and it's really now. And that's what's inspired this massive movement towards what they call net zero. So net zero has become a big movement. Countries around the world have been saying we're going to go to net zero. Companies around the world have been saying we're going to go to net zero. I'm quite proud to say that the UK is the first country, it was the first country in the world to make its net zero target legally binding. And we do, and we're increasing the net zero target as well. So what does net zero mean? It basically means that when we reach the point of 2050, we need to have stopped putting any net emissions into the atmosphere. And that means either we don't put them in the first place, or if we do put them in, we take them back out again. That's what net zero means. And for most of climate action and most of my time, I've been focused on the big picture of net zero. So this is showing you how much it's actually spread. If you look in the middle bit, the GDP, 92% of the companies that make up GDP for the world either have their own net zero target or they're in a territory that set theirs. And that's how serious this whole net zero thing has become. So most of the time when people think about net zero, they focus on the zero part of it, which is how to get emissions down, how to stop the problem getting worse. And that's where I spent most of my life and most of my career, trying to stop climate change getting worse. And that's where your energy efficiency comes in. That's where your demand management comes in. That's where your electric vehicles come in, your solar power, your wind, all of those things that we're doing. And that has had the lion's share of climate attention and probably should have had and still needs it. We're not going fast enough. But what we haven't been paying attention to is the net part of net zero. And some people think that's going to be quite small. It might only be 5%. Some people think 10%. Some people think it's more likely to be 20 or 25% of the answer. And yet it's getting very little of the attention. So that's where I started to get interested in this area. So when I heard about net zero, I also heard about this thing, carbon neutral. We can be CO2 neutral, we can be carbon neutral. And we do this by buying offsets. If I could see all your faces, I'd ask who recognizes this and who's heard about offsets and who's also heard all the terrible headlines around offsets. Because no sooner were we all engaging with offsets and saying everything could be carbon neutral this and carbon neutral that, than the headlines started coming. More than 90% of rainforest carbon offsets by biggest providers are worthless. Junk carbon offsets. Faulty credits tarnish billion-dollar carbon offset seller. Basically, offsets have not played up in the way that any of us really hoped that they would. And here's one of the reasons. This is me walking the Camino de Santiago in Spain. I did it in 2020, just before I met carbon removals. I did it during COVID. It was just when Europe opened up, and I decided I was so restless at this point that I wanted to walk a long way. And I overshot slightly because I walked 500 miles along this route across northern Spain. But I put this picture in here because it was an old pilgrimage route. And in the past, in medieval times, you could actually walk this route. And if you walked this route and then went to the cathedral in Santiago and went to Mass, you had your sins forgiven. And so many people did. They wanted to go, and once in a lifetime, they'd walk this pilgrimage route and have their sins forgiven. But if you were rich enough, you didn't have to walk it yourself. You could pay someone else to walk it. And as long as you paid the money, the Vatican said that you had your sins forgiven and you got a certificate to prove it. And that's the problem with offsets and the way that we've been treating them. We've been treating them as a way to wash away your climate sins. You do it, then you wash away your sins. I pay you not to emit your emissions, so I don't have to reduce mine. It's an excuse. It's a way not to have to address what you need to do, not to do the hard stuff. And that's what's basically gone wrong with carbon offsets. I can talk about it a bit more if you like, but that's my analysis. So there are carbon credits, which I think are really important and good. There's reduction credits where you can help the global south or help countries that can't afford to avoid their fossil emissions, can't afford to transfer to clean energy, and you can help them do that. There's protection credits where you can stop deforestation. You can help to pay for stopping deforestation. And those are good things. And that's what the bulk of all the offsets that you've ever heard about are. They're either reduction or protection. Carbon removals are different. Carbon removals are anything where you're actually taking the CO2 back out of the air. You're not stopping emissions going into the air. You're not just stopping the problem getting worse. You're actually fixing it. You're taking emissions out of the air. So what goes up comes back down. So different credits do different things, and reduction and protection are important contributions to the world's goals. But removal is taking responsibility for cleaning up your own mess. If you put it in the air, you need to take it back out again. I'll talk a bit more about that. But first of all, just I think a good way to think about carbon removals is like cleaning up a beach or cleaning up litter. It's like we're going in there and saying we put it in the air, we need to take it back out again. So it's not just me saying that carbon removals are going to be important. This is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And when I saw this come out in 2022, I was already working on carbon removals, but this sealed the deal. Because this whole slew of scientists from around the world said carbon removals are now unavoidable. We've left it too late to do this just with reductions. It hasn't been a choice about whether we need carbon removals for a long time. And they're unavoidable for 3 reasons. One, reaching net zero quickly enough, because otherwise we can't get down there fast enough. We've left it too late to start. The second one is even when we get there, dealing with all the residual emissions that we otherwise can't get rid of. And the third one is my favorite, which is when we do get there, we can keep going. We don't just stay steady, we keep going, we start to reverse climate change, take the mess back out of the atmosphere, and give the world a chance to heal. So on the back of this, I set up 2 organizations. The main one is Rethinking Removals. That's the one that you just heard about. It's a nonprofit organization which is focused on everything it will take to get the right carbon removals done in the right way. We can't get to net zero without carbon removals. I also have a company called Curate, which is focused on anything else it will take. So Curate looks at the commercial ways in which we might need to act on this and is really trying to act as a market maker. They're sister organizations, and both of them are focused on what would it take to get carbon removals to the pace and scale that the science tells us we need, while also making sure it's done right and doesn't get in the way of all of our other climate goals, but actually helps to reinforce them. So how do you remove carbon from the atmosphere? The first thing I want to say here is a lot of people say, do you mean carbon capture or carbon capture and storage? And there's a lot of kind of loose language around carbon removals. In fact, carbon capture and storage typically doesn't refer to carbon removals at all. It refers to if you're burning fossil fuels, like in a factory or in a coal plant or something like that, if you capture the emissions that come out of the chimney and you put them back down underground, you're stopping carbon getting in the air. You're stopping fossil fuel carbon getting into the air. So that's an avoidance. Carbon removal is if it starts in the air and it ends up out of the air and stays out of it. And that's a different thing. And one fantastic way of doing this is with trees. It still blows my mind that trees make their entire bodies out of thin air, out of the carbon in the air. And so trees are fantastic carbon capture devices. One challenge is they take a bit of time to grow. And another challenge is how long they stay keeping the carbon in. If you're careful with the trees, it can last for a very long time. But if you're not careful, trees can be chopped down, or of course they can burn. So trees are an important part of this story, but they're not the whole answer. We can't do all of this on the back of planting trees. But what you can do, for example, is you can take the wood from trees and you can put it into buildings. This is a wonderful thing to do because it keeps the carbon locked up in the wood as long as the building's there. It also displaces cement and concrete, which is a very big emitter of carbon. And also they're beautiful. As you can see, this is a Thomas Heatherwick building. He's very keen on building with wood. You can also work with soil to get more carbon staying in the soil, and that's not just good for the soil, it's good for the crops. And again, if you're careful about how you can do it in such a way that the carbon stays there for a long time. You can also do this thing called biochar. And I know this is one of the places where a lot of the climate justice aspects of this story come in, because people think about carbon removals and they think about it as something that's we only do in kind of rich countries or developed countries. But we're working with some companies in India that have all of these women who are making biochar. What they do is they put the leftovers from agriculture in this pit, they cover it over, they light it on fire and cover it over, and it burns in the absence of oxygen. And it creates this stuff, which looks a little bit like charcoal, but you can't burn it anymore. The carbon is locked up in it. And then they spread it on their fields to get better yields for their crops. And they also get money for keeping the carbon out of the sky. They can get carbon credits for this. This is actually something that was originally invented by Native Americans in the Amazon. They weren't doing it to capture carbon. They were doing it to improve the quality of their soils. But the same thing applies here as well. So I love this one. It's got nature, it's got tech, and it's got indigenous wisdom in one beautiful package. And that's what the stuff looks like. It tastes, I have tasted it. It tastes like ash, but it looks beautiful. Then you can also take this kind of rock called basalt rock. Now, basalt rock is naturally acts as a sponge for carbon dioxide. It does it over thousands of years on the Earth, but it takes a really long time. So that's not going to be enough of a timescale for us to be able to get the help that we need. But if you think a little bit about coffee, if you just use coffee beans and try to make your coffee, you can shake the coffee beans up in boiling water for as long as you like, but it's going to take a really long time to get a strong brew. But if you grind up the coffee beans and turn them into coffee grounds, you can do it quite quickly. Similarly, if you grind up those rocks and spread them on the field, instead of this reaction taking thousands of years, this reaction of acting as a sponge and taking up CO2, it can happen in 5 or 10 years. And that's called enhanced rock weathering. And there's spreading it onto the fields, which doesn't just give a nice wide area for this reaction to take place, but it also brings minerals to the soil, so it helps improve crops as well. You can also put dust like that into rivers, and this helps to deacidify the rivers. This is a company that actually started off by thinking, let's make the rivers healthy again because they've got acidic because of pollution. And they began to realize that when they deacidified the rivers, they also were taking up more carbon dioxide. So they're starting to do this in more places as well across rivers. And then you can also do it in the oceans. And there's lots of companies that are starting to do this, restore the climate and heal the ocean, because the way that you get the ocean to take up more carbon dioxide is similarly also preventing the ocean from being so highly acidified. So it's solving another part of the climate problem as well. You can do it in kind of big futuristic looking devices like this, where you're pumping the water through and acting on it. But you can also do it in much simpler ways. This is a kelp forest. If you make a kelp forest grow, just like making trees grow, you're taking carbon dioxide out of the water, and that means you take more out of the air. And then you can do the famous one, which is direct air capture. This is me in Climeworks at the Orca plant in Iceland. And this is what it looks like. It's quite small at the moment, but it's growing. And what this does is it blows air over capture devices. They capture the CO2. It's a bit like, I think of it a bit like a Post-it. You want a Post-it to stick strongly enough that it sticks, but not so strongly you can't take it off. And similarly, the CO2 capture device, it takes the CO2 in just strongly enough to stick, and then you take it back off when you put it in a blimp. And there's an immense poetry to this as well, because when you've done that, you actually put it back where it came from, underground. And this is a place that they do that. At the moment, it's really tiny. They're just injecting it down there. But when I went there and touched it, it felt like touching the first iPhone, because we're going to have so many more of these. And this is what happens to it. If you look at the one on the right-hand side of my left hand, this is rock that's full of holes. This is quite fresh lava in Iceland. And the one on the other hand is solid. So the carbon dioxide has gone down there in water, it's reacted with the minerals, and it's gone. Within 2 years, it's just solid. It's not going to be coming back. And there's other bigger attempts to do this. This is the biggest one in the world. This is going to do 500,000 tons of carbon dioxide a year. And this is in Texas, in oil country, in the middle of all these places where they're trying to pull oil out of the ground. This is one plant that's now going to be putting the CO2 back. But it's not just in places like Texas or Iceland. I went on a trip to Kenya. Kenya has very similar conditions to Iceland. And this is a place where some very brilliant people in Kenya are talking about bringing direct air capture to Kenya. They can do it. They can also do it as a means of generating renewable electricity to run it, which it currently isn't being used. There's lots of untapped solar power, untapped wind power that they're not using at the moment. And if they develop that renewable energy for direct air capture, they can also use it for other things as well. And I was immensely proud of this. That the guy who's running this company now, he said to me, Gabrielle, people talk about Africa as being a victim of climate change that needs aid. He said, we've got brilliant, young, dynamic people here. We are going to build the solutions of the future. We are going to be the climate warriors of the future that get us all out of this mess. And he looked me in the eye and he said, Gabrielle, this is not going to be done to us. This is not going to be done for us. This is going to be done by us. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how you can make it happen. So this is some of the things that we've been doing with Curate, actually buying carbon removals from some of these brilliant companies and selling them to places where we can change the narrative about removals and people can understand better what to do. So for example, we carbon removed the Queen's Platinum Jubilee and also Her Majesty's funeral. We carbon removed the London Marathon events using some of these companies that I've just spoken about. We did the first carbon removed concerts at the O2, which is the 1975, where everybody got a sign on their ticket saying the carbon has been removed from this concert. Also, companies are starting to set up, especially airlines, where they don't really have other solutions. They're trying to make sustainable aviation fuel. They're trying to get more efficient in the way that they do it, but they're going to have a big gap. And so British Airways has started buying carbon removals as a way to build the industry, knowing that they're going to need it in the future. So remember I said that this is like cleaning up a beach. And one of the things I want to finish on now, when I'm thinking about carbon removals and how they work, is that I've worked on climate change for a really long time. And most of the time, it's actually pretty despairing. Everything you're doing is just trying to stop the problem getting even more catastrophic. And the world seems to be going in the wrong direction, and it's too hard and it's too far. But you look at the look on the faces of these kids as they're cleaning up this beach and what it feels like to have done it afterwards. And I realized that one of the reasons I'm so excited about carbon removals is it gives me an emotion that we don't often feel if we work in the climate space, which is it gives me hope. It gives me hope that alongside the reductions that we need to speed up, we actually have a way to fill in this hole that we've been digging for ourselves, take the carbon back out of the sky and keep it out. So I promised you, I'm just going to finish now, then we can go into the breakouts and have some questions. I promised you this plaque. It was while I was in Iceland looking at this particular carbon removal approach that I also went to see this. This was Ok Glacier on the top of a mountain in Iceland. Ok spelled like OK. And Ok Glacier in 1986 was a nice big glacier. And by 2019, it had gone. It had completely gone. It was the first Icelandic glacier to melt completely, and the others are following that. And so the very brilliant Icelandics, they actually had a funeral for the glacier. And they made a plaque and they put the plaque on a rock. And I went up onto this glacier with the guy who was the poet who wrote what was on this plaque. So if you think to yourself, you've got 4 lines to write a plaque that's going to go onto this rock to commemorate the first glacier lost in Iceland, what would you write? And he's a very brilliant man, Andrew Magnusson. And he said, I was thinking, should I make it like Icelandic saga, something like that? No, he said, I just wanted to tell it straight, the way it is. So he wrote it as a letter to the future. And after I'd been to see this Icelandic carbon removal plant, I then went to see this plaque. And I have to tell you, it made me cry. So I'm going to finish with telling you what's on the plaque. And here we are. It says, a letter to the future. Ok is the first Icelandic glacier to lose its status as a glacier. In the next 200 years, all our glaciers are expected to follow the same path. This monument is to acknowledge that we know what is happening and what needs to be done. Only you know if we did it. August 2019, 415 parts per million CO2. Speaking to mothers on this group now, we are looking to the future. And we do know what's happening and we do know what needs to be done. And God help us all if we don't do it. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much. What powerful words, really powerful words to end with, and astonishingly accurate timekeeping there, because you shared a phenomenal amount, and so many of those methods I wasn't aware of. So really grateful. Thank you so much. And yeah, as has been said, I think Lindsay's going to pop us into breakout rooms now. And there's a suggested question to discuss, although it's always good to see what emerges in these spaces. We'll have about 15 minutes, maybe slightly less, 14, 15 minutes. And the suggested question is, what role, if any, do you think carbon removals need to play in solving climate change? And how could we play a part in building up capacity to take carbon out of the sky? And then we'll have the same amount of time when we get back for questions. So yeah, maybe start thinking about what might be good to ask directly to Gabrielle on return. So thank you, Lindsay. I'll pass back to you to pop us into breakout rooms.
Right, I've popped everyone into groups of 3 or 4. Apologies, the breakout rooms did open unexpectedly, so I apologise if people went into the rooms early. So big apology from me for that. But yeah, we're officially going into breakout rooms, and I will let you all in.
I don't think I was assigned into one.
No, I was going to hold off.
Holding off to, okay. Gabriel, what would you like to do? Do you want to go into a breakout room or would you like to stay?
So that people can chat.
Okay.
I will just stop the recording now as well. Shall I pause?
Yeah, okay. Great. Well, thank you. Good to see everybody back. I hope you had some really interesting and fruitful conversations. This is your opportunity to now ask Gabrielle any questions that you might have. There's a couple in the chat already. But if you can do anything you like. You can put it in the chat. You can put your hand up, and then I'll ask you to come off mute to actually ask the question yourself. So any questions that you have, please go for it. But I want to start with my question. I wanted to know. So the government has said that they're going to put, I think it was 22 billion into CCS, and I just wondered what your thoughts were in terms of is that money well spent, or do you think it could be better spent elsewhere?
So governments have this challenging situation where they have to look at trade-offs, and they're looking at where the money should be invested. As I mentioned partway through my talk, CCS, carbon capture and storage, is actually different from carbon removals. And the thing that the government's putting that money into is not carbon removals. It's actually investing in capturing fossil emissions and burying those. But some of it is going to go, they're also looking at doing a thing called BECCS, which is a power plant that's burning wood and then capturing the CO2 and burying that. As to whether the money's well spent, I don't know. I started looking at carbon capture and storage before I was looking at removals. And one thing I'd say is it is a solution that's going to be essential for industrial emissions. So it's going to be essential and steel, some of the industries that don't really have a very viable alternative to the emissions that they're putting out. So capturing those and burying them before they get into the atmosphere is going to be a part of the story. Somebody has to invest in it to get the cost down. The UK government some years ago in the early 2000s promised £1 billion to start this whole thing up back in the day, and then pulled the money at the last minute, and that set the whole thing back a long time. So I look at how Germany subsidized solar power and paid over the odds to make sure that the price could start getting down before it went to China. And I say I can see reasons why this is a leadership thing to do. As to whether there are better things to spend the money on, I have to say that my sister was a politician for many years. I have immense respect for politicians. I know how hard their job is, and I'm kind of glad that I don't have to make that decision. Is that a Weasley way to get out of it?
We'll let you do that.
Thank you.
We've got a few questions in the chat. There's one I particularly like the look of, which was from Anna. What capacity do we currently have for carbon removal, and what capacity do we need to have a chance of getting to net zero? Also, has the backlash against offsetting caused a big reduction in investment from companies in removals?
So this is a brilliant question, and I thank you for asking it. So first of all, what capacity we currently have, if you look at high durability removals, so removals that last longer than a few decades when the carbon stays out of the atmosphere, we're currently doing about 1 million tons a year. That's 1 million with an M. And what we need to get to in the next 20 years is we need to get that from 1 million to 10 billion. So that's we need to go up by a factor of 10,000. And that means we need to get to a capacity of removing, which is, brace yourselves, the equivalent of the entire oil and gas industry today. And that's why we sort of need to start now, because it's currently very, very tiny. And yet we can get onto an exponential curve. And anyone who's a mathematician among us will know that the most important part of an exponential curve is the beginning. That's where you can have the biggest influence. And that's why I find this but not just daunting, but also exciting. As to the question about the backlash against offsetting, it has been painful. And we were talking a little bit about this in our breakout, that I feel worried for the good projects that are being tarred by the same brush as the bad ones, even outside removals. We need to stop deforestation. We need to help the global south to convert their infrastructure. And many of those projects have just suddenly had really good projects with good people running them have had the money pulled. That said, I think people are beginning to understand that removals are a different thing from offsets. If you look at the entire voluntary carbon market, which is the market for credits, 97% of it is avoidance offsets, only 3% of it's removals. And most of those are trees. And so I think we are still in a place where people see removals, starting to see removals differently. And especially that whole argument that removals are about taking responsibility for your own emissions, I think is something that many people can get their heads around.
That's really interesting, actually, to think about. They've got to start communicating them as different things, and things that are, and yeah, our understanding of that, because they all just get lumped in the same place, don't they? There was a question from Sarah, which was about, is there, I can't find it now, but I think I remember it, which was, is there removals of other gases, for example, methane?
Another great question. So methane, yes. Nitrous oxide, the other big greenhouse gas, not currently. Removing methane is a terrific thing to do, but it's not so much in the case of methane. Removing it from the atmosphere isn't as important as stopping it getting into the atmosphere in the first place. Because if you stop a flow of methane, you actually start to cool the atmosphere around it. It's a weird way that methane works, because it doesn't last very long in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide lasts hundreds of thousands of years. Methane only lasts decades. And so it's kind of more urgent. And also a molecule of methane packs vastly more punch, 20 to 30 times as big a greenhouse effect as carbon dioxide. So I think there's a bit more effort on stopping the leaks of methane than there is of removing it. But one thing that there is some research on is if methane starts coming out of swamplands and thawing permafrost, we might have to have a means very quickly of removing it from the atmosphere, because otherwise it's going to have a massively outsized impact. So there's quite a bit of research going on in that, but not so much in terms of the companies.
Lovely. There is another question from Anna, which was about what's the way that you just companies start communicating investment in carbon removal, so they're not accused of greenwashing.
It's quite challenging at the moment to say this is how you say it so as not to be accused of greenwashing, because we have got, I'm kind of disappointed. I feel like we're in a place now where many people have got so anxious by the bad guys who are trying to get away with stuff, that they're starting to behave as if the only thing that matters is calling out greenwashing, and not worry about the effect that any of that calling out might have on the need to build solutions. And I think we've got that slightly out of balance. There used to be a very creative tension where integrity is important and practicality is important, and in the space where the two meet, that's where the best solutions are, where there's this kind of tussling. Does it do what it should? Does it work? Does it do what it should? Does it work? And at the moment, I feel like a lot of the calling out of greenwashing is so focused on making sure that it's perfect and pure, that it's not paying attention enough to, is that stopping things happening on the ground. And I'm a global ambassador for Client Earth. Client Earth is doing a lot of the calling out and have fabulous discussions with them about it. They're very worried that they want to make sure they're calling out the bad stuff, but they also want to make sure that they're not blocking the good stuff. So, I think in that, and having said that, how do you talk about it without being accused of greenwashing? You can never be sure that you won't be accused of it, but being transparent, showing how this fits into your overall climate plan. So we're not just doing this and only this. All the people that we work with are reducing and looking to invest in removals. And so you say, this is my plan overall. This is how this fits in. This is how that fits in. And then also looking at where you're investing the removals, looking at what the co-benefits are, looking at how the local communities benefit, looking at what impacts it has on biodiversity, and showing how this fits into your overall thesis for how to be a better company in the world, I think is a very important part of how to communicate this. And then the final part of it is, it's not about washing away your climate sins. It's not about saying, see, I don't feel guilty anymore. It's about building the solutions of the future. It's about building the solutions that we all need. And if you start talking about it like that, you're in a very different place from just saying, look at me, I'm so clean.
Yeah, really going for, yeah, it's incredible how much of a communications thing it is, isn't it? It's very, yes, very in depth for that. So there's a question from Pam, and I'm also going to add a little bit of my question into it as well, actually, which was, can you explain the scientific method more clearly on how carbon is removed using ground rocks, etc., and which type of rocks? And then I guess my question is similar to Pam's end one, which is a bit like, how efficient are these methods? Is it like the biochar is really efficient and then the trees are less efficient, and are we sort of in a position to be able to measure that in terms of, so we can put the focus where it's most impactful?
You guys ask fabulous questions. These are much more interesting than the questions I usually get. So congratulations. Yes, very, very good question. So first of all, the scientific method on how the carbon's removed. So what actually happens is, it's a natural reaction. It's called chemical weathering. And basically, whether the rock's ground up or not, you have certain kinds of silicate rock which are produced by volcanic eruptions, so which happen all around the world. So there's many of these basaltic rocks around the world. Iceland is, of course, entirely made of them, but plenty of other countries have plenty of them. They naturally take up the CO2. I said that they act as a sponge. That was just a kind of shorthand. What actually happens is chemical reactions take place with carbon dioxide dissolved in water as an acid, react with the rocks and create different minerals, create carbonate minerals. And those carbonate minerals lock up the carbon dioxide, and it stays locked up for 10,000 years. So that's how gradually, and this is one of the reasons the Earth doesn't just keep getting hotter and hotter and hotter, because naturally carbon dioxide comes out of volcanoes, but naturally it goes back into rocks. It just takes a really long time to do it. So that's already, useful for us when we're speeding it up. And the reason it gets faster when you grind up the rock, I use that analogy of the coffee, is just that the reactions happens on the surface of the rocks. So if you've got a big sphere, you've got a certain amount of surface, but if you break it up into lots of pieces, you get loads more surface. And so the reaction can happen much faster on all the different pieces of the surface. So that's the kind of chemistry and physics of how it is, and the kinds of rocks that you need to use. It's basically most silicate rocks that have come out of volcanoes. And so that's why Kenya is another good place to do it, but there's plenty of others as well. Including India, by the way. There's some really good projects in India because there's loads of basaltic rock across India. As to how efficient they are compared to each other. So this one, enhanced rock weathering, you've got to get the rock, you've got to grind it up, you've got to spread it on fields. So it's not, you don't have to build a big factory, you don't have a big capital expenditure or anything, you just need to get ground up rocks and spread them on fields and transport them a bit. So one of the companies that we work with is working with mining companies. They've ground up, they haven't ground it up, they've broken it up and they've thrown it away. That's the stuff they weren't mining for. And now they can actually take stuff that's already broken up and just take it one step further. If you can find quarries near fields, then you don't have to transport very far. That's another good reason, another good way to do it. Biochar is incredible because you can do it on a really small scale, but kind of add it up. So that's something in both India and Africa. There's loads of smallholders. There's youth groups. There's these women that I showed you in India who can just collect waste from agricultural waste that would have been burned, and instead turn it into biochar, put it into sacks and sell it to farmers. And so that's very low key and efficient. Direct air capture takes loads of energy to put in. But one of the reasons it's good is that once you've done it, you know exactly how much CO2 you've got. You can weigh it. You put it in a blimp, you can weigh it. Whereas one of the challenges with things like biochar and enhanced rock weathering is once you put it out there, you have to do modeling and measurements to see what's done. So everything's a trade-off. You either know exactly what you've got, but have to put lots of energy in, or you don't have to put so much energy and you let nature help you, but then you have to kind of work very hard to know exactly how much you've done. And I think that's why I say we should do portfolios. That's why we're always talking about portfolios. There's no one best answer. It's going to be a mix of all of these that gives us solutions, I think.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. There is a couple of longer questions. I think we've probably got time for one more question. And I was going to, there's one from Ali. For us, Ali, do you want to come off mute and actually ask your question?
Which one? The what first one about CCS?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was something I was working in 1997 on some CCS, and it was going straight into the very low ocean. It was Norway wanting to basically mine and put carbon directly. So they were liquefying it and they were putting it down, or it became liquid at some point, and then it was acting like mercury, sort of at great pressure. And they didn't do it after they decided not to do it. That was with the UK government, I think. So is that something that they're still considering?
This is a wonderfully technical questions. I'm really glad my PhD's in chemistry. So I actually went to visit. They are now doing this in Norway. There's a thing called the Northern Lights, which and I went to visit the site of it in Bergen a few weeks ago. They don't liquefy the CO2. They mix it up with water and they put it under that way. And what they've done is they've drilled down into the North Sea, into what they call saline aquifers, which are very, very deep. Salty, the salty water has kind of made spaces in the rock, and that's where they inject the CO2. That injection process, the way that they're doing it now, is immensely well understood and very well quantified, and so it's really working. But the ones that I showed you in Iceland is a different process. It's actually, if you inject CO2 into quite fresh lava where there's lots of holes in it, you get that mineralization reaction. So those are the two ways you do it. You either put it underground, mixed with water and pressurized, or you put it underground and it mineralizes. Mineralizing is the best because it doesn't come up.
Exactly.
There's not so many places in the world you can do that compared to the other, so we sort of need both.
And
one thing I would just say, I know we're running out of time, but if anyone wants to collect the questions and send them to me, I'm really happy to write written answers to them as well for ones that we haven't got to. You were asking the best questions, and so I'm more than happy to follow up if that's helpful.
That is fantastic, actually. Yeah, so what we will do is we'll take the questions off the chat and send them to you, and then we will and when because we will do a follow-up to this call so we can put the answers in the chat, in the answers in the follow-up email, so that you will all receive them. That is brilliant. I am going to stop. Oh, actually, there's one. Oh no, I will stop that because I do want to make sure that we finish by 9:15, which is all
I can give a quick answer to. What were you looking at?
Was Catherine's. Catherine, do you want to quickly come up mute and ask your question?
Yeah, I can do, although I think there are other people ahead of me, but sure. Basically, it was about land use and the fact that land use change is a major contributor to climate change. So is there a danger of taking land for some of the more technological solutions that then takes that land away from being reforested, for example?
Great question. So I'll answer it very quickly. So reforestation is a carbon removal method. So we work a lot with restoring ecosystems that can also enable them to take up much more carbon. The more technological removals like direct air capture take up very little land. They take a lot of energy, but very little land. The ones that do take up land are biochar and enhanced rock weathering, and they go onto agricultural land. So you don't make new land just to be able to put them down. They go onto fields because they also increase the yield of crops. So I think this is one of the areas where you can actually find synergies instead of trade-offs, and that's one of the most important things to look for here.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your very good answers and very, again, straight talking answers to our questions. We will, as I say, we will make sure that we put them all into a document, and we'll send them to you tonight so that you've got the questions, and then when you can get back to me, that would be fantastic. So that's it for tonight. Thank you to everyone for joining. I think I'm going to do a bit of a close, and then so is Lucy. I just wanted to say thanks. It's great to have all of you on the call tonight. Just a little reminder of Mothers Can. If you are interested in knowing more about us, we have a welcome call on Wednesday, and Lindsay is putting a link in the chat now. So if you want to sign up, you can do. And then we run our course, which anybody is welcome to join, which will be running in January, from the 23rd of January. So I'm just going to pass over to Lucy just to give a little bit of a close from Parents of the Future.
Yeah, and another big thank you to Gabrielle and the team at Mothers Can and the people here from Parents of Future. It was a really enjoyable, informative evening. And yeah, sort of thinking back to the breakout question, it seems that there is a kind of general view that yes, there's definitely a role to play here. And that also we need to be really careful that we're not taking our eyes away from, reducing consumption and moving away from fossil fuels. So it feels really well timed that we've got this new fossil fuel toolkit. I think Mike is going to pop the link in the chat. It's a really accessible toolkit that shares some information and directs us some resources, and there's some really easy actions you can take. You don't need to be part of Parents for Future to use it. It's just like an easy toolkit that hopefully people will find useful with their campaigning. But yeah, a big thank you from all of us. And yeah, I hope everyone goes on to enjoy the rest of their evening. Extra big thank you to Gabrielle. Yeah, looking forward to learning more soon.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
So much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.